All right, evening. Whoever is watching this, I'm assuming my instructor, Jamie. Today I'm going to give a presentation on the professional standards in education. Um, I'm not too familiar with PowerPoint. I've used it in the past, but oh shoot, there's a lot of light in my face. Sorry. I've used it in the past. Hopefully the audio is coming through clear, but we're going to go over a few things, really to sort of hammer down the importance of standards within disciplines and across disciplines. So, without further ado, let's move on with the presentation. I will start just by giving out a quick table of contents. We're going to start off by talking about InTask, what it is and why it's important. Then we're going to move into the four categories of standards. You can read them right there. Then I'll go into the NCSS standards after we complete with the InTask standards, because that is the National Council for Social Studies, and I intend to be a social studies teacher. Specifically, history would be my field of expertise, I hope. Then we're going to sort of discuss some of the common themes between the two groups of standards. Why do we have two sets of standards, and is there some sort of conformity between them that we can see is necessary for good education and teaching. Then we're going to talk about the importance of collaborating through data and what we can do to improve practices as teachers. So, all right. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the Interstate Teacher Assessment and Support Consortium, or InTask standards. They serve as a resource to states, districts, teachers, etc., as they develop policies and programs for teachers. Now, like I said, I'm not too familiar with PowerPoint, but what I remember was that PowerPoint is mostly just bullet points, the basic information, and then usually in the presentation you sort of give a little more feedback. So hopefully you weren't expecting more information, because these are really like kind of bullet points, and then I can explain it better. This is coming out terribly, hopefully. All right. An attempt to set national standard for teachers. Now, that's an important thing, because we want to know that teachers all across the country are being held to a certain standard. That if I were to, as a parent, if I were to go to Florida or Montana or California or Nevada, I am not going to be under the misbelief that teachers are believe a different kind of core philosophy of what education should be. It's not that school boards and between states and localities can have their own curriculum. It's the idea that, like, what kind of standard do we hold teachers to? Usually involves, we'll get more into the broad categories later, but the new standards are designed for all teachers. Okay, this is a little bit of an update. This is the most recent edition of this core teaching standards. It's from 2011. The previous edition came out in 1992, and that was mostly just for beginners. What should we hold beginners to? Now they updated basically the language so it includes all teachers. And then we got into, in the introduction of the pamphlet, it talks about, quote, banner, bar, and opportunity to learn. That's how they basically explained what the purpose of the standards are, and I kind of like that. Basically, I'm a little disappointed that the third one wasn't also a B, but I'll just get over that. But the first one was banner, and but announcing a big picture vision for what you want to go, where you want to go. And then, so that's like your slogan, this is like what we believe. And then bar is that you need to have that set of expectations for what we expect, redundant, of teachers. Set a standard. And then the opportunity to learn. You need to create the sort of environment that helps support and foster a sense of education and learning for the learners, which I found out through this pamphlet is the new appropriate term for student, because I think they emphasize that student is sort of a passive thing while learning is an active thing. So yeah, that was interesting to find out. All right. So the first broad category of standards is they put it as learner and learning. And they broke this down to three main sections: learner development, learner differences, and learning environments. So learner development, we want to understand how learners grow and develop. And what was very, very focused in on this, and then we can see it in the learning differences, is that we need to treat, it's going to be hard to switch from students to learners. We need to treat learners as individuals with different backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds, different national origins, or different economic statuses. And these all play a role in how the kid is going to relate to being in schools or with the material that they're comprehending, especially in something like social studies or history. It very much is a, how should I say, it can be a difficult thing to communicate with students who might have a different background. Let's say the most obvious. I'm obviously from an English-speaking background. I speak English. If I had a student of predominantly Hispanic or Spanish students, when I'm teaching them history, or American history in particular, it's an English-speaking history. We come from England. Our country is founded as an English colony, so they might not have the same sort of historical background knowledge or historical context. They come from a different culture. Spain is a lot different from England. So you need to take that into sort of account. And then the learning environments. I need to move my little face here. Okay. But they create environments that promote individual and collaborative learning. That's important because both aspects are important in education. The individual obviously is going to go on and do many things on an individual basis, but they are going to be part of a collaborative community. And I think this is going to come up later when I talk about social studies, but we'll get more into that later. But you need to also encourage a positive social interaction and to foster self-motivation. You need to give students, learners, the desire to want to educate themselves. That's important to sort of foster. All right. The second broad category is content. This is broken down into content knowledge and application of content. The teacher must understand central concept, tools of inquiry, and structures of the discipline. The reason for this is obvious, is like if you are going to be the expert in the room, as you presumably will be, you need to know your stuff. And you need to know the methodology of how it's like portrayed to students, because they have different concepts and they have different grasps of society, reality. They're very new in their development. They're young. Most learners are, we're going to be talking ages 14 to 18 roughly. So you have to find a way to relate the material to that age group. You need to create experiences that make the discipline accessible and meaningful. Once again, I already kind of talked over about this in the learner category, but you'll see how there's a lot of cross application between the different standards. But we need to create experiences that make the discipline accessible and meaningful. Things such as math and science, well, maybe not science, that's a little harder, but something like reading and math are very easy for kids to understand, learners, to understand what the importance of it. But like when we're going to talk about social studies later, why should students care about history or about geography or about civics? It won't help them get a job, to be honest, in a lot of cases, but it will help them be members of a functioning democracy. So, application of content can utilize different perspectives to engage learners in critical thinking, creativity, and collaborative problem solving. I always like the phrase, we need to teach students how to think, not what to think. And I think that kind of like goes into that. That they need to be able to develop their problem solving skill and critical thinking skills and to really question. I think I've heard of a concept called like the 5 whys. So, you need to be able to answer the question why something happened and why that happened that led to the thing happening. You got to go 5 back before you can even say you have any grasp of knowledge of why something happens in the first place. There's a cause and effect to everything. Instructional practice. Obviously, we need to assess students, so we need to understand the multiple methods to engage learners in their growth. We need to monitor learners' progress and guide teacher and learner future decision making. Let me bold this up here. Oops. Right. Well, the assessment phase of education is a difficult one because some learners will become discouraged when they get a bad grade. You need to be able to guide them and give them a path forward if it comes to that sort of point. And when planning for instruction, we need to support every student in meeting their goals. So that's what we kind of come back doing through treating every learner as it's going to be really hard to adjust to learner instead of student. We need to create a path for each individual learner and help them meet goals, because maybe not everyone's best destined for college. I've mentioned that in my last paper. Maybe someone just needs to basically get a passing grade so they can move on to the next grade. And I don't want them to think of that education that way, because they need to be able to apply what they learn in the real world. It's not just about getting a grade. But grades are a part of education. Instructional strategies: understand variety of strategies that encourage learners to develop a deep understanding of the content, to build the skills to apply the knowledge. This is exactly what we're talking about. I kind of jumped ahead, but that's instructional strategy. Okay, this one actually is really important to me, and I think this is where you're going to start to see the common themes between the two sets of standards that we're going to be talking about, and also what teachers can do to improve the profession. But professional responsibility is about learning and ethical practice. You need to engage in ongoing professional learning. What that kind of means is that there's new developments in your field all the time, and not only in your field of expertise, but in pedagogy in general. So you need to keep up to date on all that sort of stuff, and you need to use evidence for self-evaluation. You need to sort of divorce yourself from subjectivity as much as you can. Reflects the actions they take on learners and families and communities. Yes, teachers are kind of pillars of communities. I think I've mentioned in my paper once again that parents, after parents, teachers are sort of seen as the most mature leaders in the average community, because we're adopting the responsibility of these people's children's education. It's the most important thing in the world. It's not something to be taken lightly. So we need to keep that into consideration. And we need to adapt to the needs of learners. That's most, again, a little bit redundant with some of the other ones that we need to. There might be a C student or a D student, and we need to help them get up to a reasonable level without thinking that they need to go to college. We just need to basically think what is important for this person to take away from that class. And leadership collaboration takes responsibility for students' learning and collaborates with learners, families, colleagues, and communities to ensure learner growth. Obviously, there's only so much a teacher can do inside the classroom, or the learning environment, as they call it in the standards. So we need to be able to work with the community and the family, the parents, to make sure that the learner is getting the best possible chance they have to succeed in the classroom or learning environment or life. Okay, so now we're going to get into a little bit of my particular field. This comes from the National Council for Social Studies and Standards. Once again, I'm a little nervous. I'm not used to giving presentations on this sort of stuff, but I'll get used to it. I'm a pretty good public speaker. All right, content knowledge. So you're going to see a lot of overlap. This is what we talked about. They have 5 core standards in the NCSS. Content knowledge, application content through planning, design and implementation of instruction assessment, social studies, learners and learning, and professional responsibility, informed action. So 4 of these 5 are parallel with InTask. The only one that you will not see in InTask is one of the subcategories that are categories that you can broadly define them as, is application of content through planning. In this one, they say plan through sequences that leverage social studies knowledge and literacies to support the civic competence of learners. And this is the key word, I think, was civic competence. So once again, what is the importance of geography, history, these sort of things? Does a student really need to know where Bangladesh is? Maybe, because maybe Bangladesh is an important part of future events. So they need to keep that in consideration. Design and implementation of instruction and assessment, utilize data literacy and learner self-assessment to promote civic competence. That concept comes up quite a bit in the standards. Create collaborative interdisciplinary learning environments. There's going to be a lot of cross-disciplinary between social studies, especially within the humanities. You got English. There's obviously a lot of historical books, either fiction or nonfiction, that play a big role in history. The one that jumps to mind is The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. That is not just a piece of fiction; it's a important book in the context of American history. I think it's one of the inspiration behind a lot of Teddy Roosevelt's FDA, although that was not the intended purpose. But that's a more detailed thing. All right. So professional responsibility, informed action, reflect, expand the knowledge, inquiry. So once again, we already talked about how there's a lot of parallels between the two standards. So I won't get too much more into that. So we talked about common themes again amongst these standards. It seems that one of the things that is most paramount throughout all the standards is embracing the individuality of learners. That they have variance based on a whole host of factors that play, socioeconomic status, national origin. It could be a lot of things that play a factor. So that is a common theme that runs parallel between the two. I would say also professional responsibility and the importance of continuing education is another common theme because, like I said, it was actually in the discussion group for this week's topic about change, and I said in my response that change is neither good nor bad. It is necessary and inescapable. So we need to keep ourselves informed, not only in pedagogy, not only in our discipline, but I'd also say in terms of the culture broadly. I mean, we're going to be educating teenagers primarily. And teenagers are very responsive to what culture is affecting them. It could be how social media is affecting them. It could be how maybe there's this new, television or movie series that is affecting them. Maybe it's some sort of current event that is affecting them. So we need to basically continue our education and to be very cognizant of the world around us in order so that we can provide the best possible education we can for the learners. All right, so collaboration within InTask and NCS. Now, both promote collaboration, although I didn't find as much collaboration as an emphasis in the NCSS. The best I could find was this from page 29. Civic competence, how they define civic competence, allows students to participate in the government and permit individuals to meet, discuss, and collaborate to promote their interests within a framework of democratic principles. So the whole idea of social studies, the first word in it, social, is a sense of collaboration. So we need to collaborate with colleagues, with the students, with the families, communities. I feel like I repeat myself a bit, but that's how I found the standards to be, is not redundant, but they kind of each standard expanded upon the previous one with more language, but it was all kind of one tapestry. I would say that all emphasize the importance of collaboration, professional responsibility, and content knowledge mostly. So this one was from section 9C. This was under, I think, professional responsibility. In collaboration with colleagues, the teacher uses a variety to evaluate the outcomes of teacher and learner to adapt planning and practice. Another one brought up collaboration was the teacher works with other school professionals to plan and jointly facilitate learners and how to meet diverse needs of learners. Now, the interesting thing about this is not everything is about the learning environment. Some of this stuff is in regards to maybe counseling that a learner might need. You need to be very aware of the situation, the home situation. Not you don't need to be intrusive. That's not what I'm saying. But you need to be able to understand, catch certain telltale signs of maybe abuse in the home. Because you need to be able to understand, is this inhibiting this learner's ability to educate themselves, or even to be, or maybe disciplinary problems. The funny thing about the standards, it didn't mention much about discipline, but I feel that might be a different part of pedagogy, not as what we expect from teachers, because I feel a big part of a teacher is creating a sense of order in the learning environment, and without discipline, you have no order. You could try to speak to your credentials or your pathos, but ultimately you're going to need to basically be an authority figure. So that's one thing I would change about the standards, is emphasize a little bit more about authority and orderliness. So also in social studies, training of individuals members of democratic societies. Democracy is a collaboration within society. That's the definition of democracy, is we're all in it together. We all have equal claim to the society, so we need to have equal responsibility for it. All right. Oh, my bad. So how are teachers expected to improve their profession by IMPAS standards? And the category that was most important to me in this regard would be professional responsibility. Particularly the expectation of ongoing education. We can't get into a sense of laziness, cognitive laziness, thinking that because we're teachers, we're know-it-alls. No, we're not. We need to have a lot of humility, as something I emphasized in my other video. The individual responsibility leads to institutional change. I cited this paper, but this was actually I think this paper was more about healthcare. But the ultimate, actually, I don't think it was about healthcare. Now that I can remember it, that was a different paper. But the individual responsibility leads to institutional change. Ultimately, all we have power over is ourselves. And if we have power over ourselves, what we do will change everything around us by extension. So if I want to be a better person, if I want to start exercising, this is kind of a weird example. If I want to start exercising more, I could serve as a beacon towards people who might be a little on the fence about exercising more. So that's the best way I can get people to improve the health of my community, is by being the best example I can be as a teacher and as a community member. So that the best way to make change is to be the best version of yourself you can be, because that's really all you have power to do. Content, utilizing different methods to engage learners in critical thinking. That is very important too. We need to keep up to date with the most recent things, most recent concepts and breakthroughs in pedagogy, because if we're not, we could end up falling down this redundant path of pushing outdated practices that don't promote critical thinking, even though we might think they do. So we need to keep up to date with ourselves. And then more broadly speaking, I thought that this was something I wanted to discuss: cross-discipline communication and research. What I mean by this is we need to communicate with other experts in other fields, and not just necessarily in education. But there's so much that goes on in education outside of just basically the pedagogy. I mean, I would say there's social psychology. I would say there's maybe economics is a factor. There's so much that goes into a learner's education that we need to basically be the best experts we can be in a vast variety of fields. And we must have an open mind, and we must not dismiss information that we might be skeptical of. And we also need to, I mentioned this earlier about like trying to keep up with cultural events. We need to be relatable with our learners. For my example, history, I need to be able to convey certain events in history from a modern context, because some people can't some students, some learners are not able to conceptualize the world before them. And then you kind of have to make that clear to them as best they can. And you do this by trying to relate to them on their level. You ask them questions. You learn about their daily lives. And this would be a good way to build a bridge and build a connection, communicate with your learners. Okay, I kind of stumbled through that because, like I said, I'm new to this whole format. I'm not used to speaking to a camera. Hopefully it wasn't that painful. But here I just summarized some of the core messages of this presentation. InTASC holds 10 core standards within 4 main subgroups: learner and learning, content, instructional practice, and professional responsibility. The SCSS, damn it, I apologize for my language. There's an extra S there. I will cut that out before I submit it. Please have some leniency there. Hold 5 standards that mirror the INTASC standards greatly. In addition to the 4 INTASC categories, NCSS also emphasizes planning. Some of the common themes we saw was adapting to learners' needs and diversity, content as a core standard, and the importance of continuing education. Collaboration with not only colleagues but with families, communities, and administrators is all vital towards the bettering of our profession. The role of individual responsibility among teachers to better themselves and their profession is also a key factor in how we can better education. Because, like I said, it's the only thing we have true control over. All right, and here's my reference page. You'll see the INTASC standards, the NCSS standards, and my 2 cited papers. Actually, one of them was a book, was the Social Studies Curriculum Purposes. So, all right. Hopefully this wasn't too painful. I enjoyed it. I will get better. And thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation, and thank you for listening. All right. Have a good evening.